Hey everybody, starting to see a few people join the room, so thank you for joining us for our roundtable today. Getting a good crowd here. As you come in, please drop in your location, say hello, say something in the chat. My name is John Lynch. I lead content and communications at TalentNeuron. I'll be your moderator today, and we'll be here asking questions of our great panel. It is nearly 2026. I can't believe I'm saying that. But I could not wish for a better way to finish this year than a conversation with our group of friends and experts here. So thank you for making time to join us also. I hope that we'll have a good hour of conversation as we look back on what we learned in 2025 and look forward to 2026, whatever that may bring, and I'm sure it's going to be all great. For our session today, we'll be running for about an hour. So we're going to have plenty of opportunity for questions. I would love for our audience to ask questions as we go. Please drop your questions in the Q&A or the chat function in the top right-hand corner, and we'll get to those about halfway through. We'll also have a poll. We will have a giveaway halfway through, where we get to spin the wheel and give away some festive gifts to our attendees. Some really high quality publications and books that we can expand on in a little while from our panel. So thanks again for being here. I will, now that we're looking like we have a very full room, I will welcome our group. So if you don't mind me, Kristi, I'll start with you. Could you say hello and introduce yourself a little bit?
I would love to. Thanks, John. I am Kristi Broom. I am co-founder of Rising Tide Cooperative, where we help organizations navigate the intersection of AI and people with a focus on upskilling and reskilling the workforce as AI continues to integrate in the workforce.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristi. Welcome. Russell, I'll hand over to you.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I know there's friends on both sides of the pond, so welcome. My name is Russell Beck. I'm an author, an award-winning author, keynote speaker, executive development programs, and I focus on the future of work and leadership.
Fantastic. Thank you, Russell. Great to have you here. And David Edwards, can I say, hand over to you?
Hello, everybody. Yes, I'm David, and I am currently Global Head of Workforce Planning for Ericsson until the end of the year. I've implemented strategic workforce planning in a number of large corporates, as well as having worked on the other side of the bench as a tech vendor. Got a brand new book coming out at the very beginning of January, the Strategic Workforce Planning Handbook, and I like to think that it's an exploration of the messy reality that practitioners have to face in the course of trying to make this stuff work.
Awesome. Thank you, David. And great to have all three of you here with the TalentNeuron team we have on board also. Rucha, I'll hand over to you for a quick intro also.
Hello, I'm Rucha Vankudre, and I'm a labor economist at TalentNeuron. Have started here a few months ago, and I've spent most of my career studying the labor market, trying to understand the trends that we're seeing and why everything is happening.
Awesome. Thanks, Rucha. And David Wilkins.
Great. Hey, everybody. Rucha, I think your comment about explaining why everything is happening is a very broad remit, especially given all the things in the world.
I'm an economist. We just, like to say we know things. That's what we do.
Fair. So Dave Wilkins, I'm a Chief Product and Strategy Officer here at TalentNeuron. Been in the HCM space now for over 30 years. I won't say how many over. Long enough to become Santa, apparently. So very excited to be here talking about all the stuff today with everyone. A lot of my points of view today are going to have been informed by conversations with some of our largest clients over the last couple of years, which comprises a big portion of the Fortune 2000. So hopefully we can share a little bit about what we think is going on in the world right now.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to have our group here. We'll be asking some questions of you as we go through the next hour. As you said, Rucha, the goal is to address everything. I'm sure we'll get there. We have already some great interaction in the chat, so please do ask questions as we go through. The premise for today's webinar is the road to 2030. So we're looking ahead at the next 4 years and the horizon of 2030 ahead of us. I would like to start with that question, figuring out, what is the meaning of 2030? Why is that a meaningful horizon for us? And Russell, given your expertise, maybe that's the question for you.
Hi, Sean. Could have predicted that one, given the title of my book, The World of Work to 2030. I blew my flag on that one somewhat. And on one hand, actually, the date's fairly arbitrary. Back in the 2010s, the early 2010s, when I used to do a lot of work when I started doing a lot of work on the future of work, I used to call it 2020 vision and make a play on vision and so forth. But obviously, we reached that point, so I had to have a new goal, a new target, and so forth. And 2030 is, on one hand, fairly arbitrary, but it's to put a stake in the ground. It's a date that is close enough for us to enable to influence it, close enough that we can make plans, we can prepare, we can do something about it. It's a bit tangible. It's not too far out. So it's something we can manage and we can prepare for. And it's also not far too far into the future, where actually, if it was 2035, 2040, or some other arbitrary date, I could be talking about living on the moon, living on Mars, mining asteroids, and so forth. And that's of no real use to anyone whatsoever. So it's close enough that we can be practical, we can prepare, and we can do something about it.
Fantastic, thank you. Kristi, I'll ask you for a follow-up thought on that. When you're speaking to clients, when you're speaking to your opposite numbers and you're figuring out their goal horizons, that's the timelines they're thinking of, why is 2030 an important date for them?
Yeah, it is. It's an important date for all the reasons that Russell mentioned. But I would add that when we think about AI, it's likely too far into the future because AI is changing so rapidly. So when we talk to organizations, it is when we think back on the past year and how the AI landscape has evolved, not only from a technology standpoint, but a use case standpoint, it's hard to envision even 2026, the end of 2026, right? So when we're talking to organizations, while we still encourage long-range planning, when we bring AI into focus, the horizon becomes much shorter by necessity. We don't know what the technology will advance to and how rapidly. So it is an interesting kind of juxtaposition of how we've been able to see far out into the future in the past. But now, from a technology standpoint, our time horizon is shrinking.
It's funny you say that, Kristi, because there was a kind of substitute question or a sort of a provisional one, which was sort of, what have you learned this year? And I'd written down, don't assume that what you thought was important in January will still be important by December.
Yeah.
Or even June. Yeah.
Well, David Edwards, I suppose that is a question for you. What were the things that what were the things that turned out to be the biggest impacts on workforce planning for you this year that perhaps you couldn't have predicted in January?
So I am struck by sort of, I almost feel like a sort of a Bond villain, not helped by having a sort of a rather poor throat at the moment. I feel like saying, Mr. AI, welcome, we have been expecting you. But I think its arrival has still come as a terrible shock. That in the sense that we're now sort of kind of knee deep into this, and people are really still scratching around trying to work out exactly what it is going to do. Perhaps with much less certainty than even I thought there might be. That has created both opportunity and challenge for workforce planners, because self-evidently the opportunity there is enormous on the assumption that workforces are going to be severely impacted. But the challenge is, well, exactly where do we stick the pin, on the donkey, and how close are we going to be? So I think, it's been almost like a whole Gartner hype cycle in 1 year for us, and I don't think it's going to get any easier next year, frankly. One of the things I think that has definitely changed, that I didn't expect to happen so quickly was, I'm not going to call it a flight from skills, but certainly a pivot away from looking at skills alone to looking at tasks and work as well. And a realization that a skills inventory on its own is not going to answer the questions about how AI is going to affect your workforce.
Yeah.
That is, Dave Wilkins, I will toss the ball to you a little bit there, because it's something you touched on in your blog post, end of year prediction blog post, which you published this week. That change in perception of AI as it relates to skills and roles and tasks.
Yeah, I'd echo, what David was just alluding to. I mean, for me, there's sort of three things I think that emerged in 25 that I mean, some of it I saw, some of it I don't think I appreciated as fully. First, the pace of change. I mean, I'd like to think I'm a reasonably forward-looking person, having seen a lot of stuff in the HCM space over the years and being pretty technologically savvy. Any time this year where I've thought the market's going to move this way, we as a vendor have 6 to 12 months to sort of get there. It's turned out we've had 3 to 6 months to get there because the market is already moving. And whether that's competitors or whether that's clients or analysts, the things that I'm seeing in advance, like the pace with which that gets realized is unprecedented in my experience in this space. And then, to David's point, the rise of AI, I think, has accelerated something that was already happening in the field of industrial automation and business process automation, but now has added another level of sort of like gasoline or rocket fuel on top of all of that to further accelerate those things. And so, to echo David's point, I mean, I think the nature of the work itself is changing. And so when you have to think about work design and work redesign, you necessarily therefore have to think about workforce design and redesign. And then you need to think about org design and redesign. And those all now have become cascaded together and inextricably interwoven in ways they weren't previously, which is
although I'll push back on that a little bit, David. Yeah. Only in the sense that I think they were always interwoven. Fair. And almost zero conversation about strategic workforce planning was ever going to end up failing to boil the ocean. We start in one place, and before you know what, there's this, there's that, there's the other. I think it's not only is it affecting the nature of the work, it's also affecting the nature of workforce planning work too. Where I think that going forward, we need to be more focused on how do we deal with change or expected change, as opposed to simply plotting ahead what the needs of the workforce are going to be.
David, just picking up on both David's comments. The pace of change has never been this fast, and it will never be this slow again. So with what we've faced in 2025, when we sit here and we look back and all those things and all that unexpected stuff, don't worry, strap yourselves in, because 2026 is just around the corner kind of thing. And the second aspect, I think, with what David Wilkins was saying, I think we're only starting to see the tip of the iceberg in terms of workforce reengineering and work reengineering and business reengineering. In the Industrial Revolution, by necessity, all work was done around the turbine, was done around what the steam could drive, the big flywheels and so forth. So everything's concentrated into the middle of warehouses, workshops, offices, as they would have been in the 18th, 19th century. Once electricity came along, it meant that people could be located physically away from the center where the turbines and the wheels were. We could sit at windows, we could have a view, work could be done differently, we could re-engineer it. And I don't think we're even, a minute of a percent forward to see how is work going to be done in the future, what work needs to be done, and from that, actually, how is it best done? How is it most productively delivered? Whether that's AI, people, offshore, onshore, outsourced partner, whatever it is, and how do we do that most effectively and most productively? And I think we are starting that. And I think 2026, looking forward, will be a big start to answer, but I don't think we'll just be seeing people doing some of their working hours.
Agreed. Yeah, coming back to something you said there, Russell, about the pace of change. I mean, this year feels like it has been a wind tunnel of news. I mean, from the labor market perspective, Rucha, it'd be good to hear from you on what you think has been most impactful this year, and also on the flip side of the coin, what seemed to be really impactful and important at the time, but then didn't turn out not to be.
Sure. So I think I have to start by talking about the big news that came out on Tuesday, which this is a little US focused, so I apologize for that. But unemployment is currently at a 4-year high. And I'm saying that with a smile to make everyone feel better about it. We also saw, teen unemployment and Black unemployment shot up a lot, and they're considered bellwethers for the rest of the economy. And we really have not been adding many jobs. We've been adding a few thousand each month, but the problem is that some is really mostly being driven by healthcare. So the rest of the economy is not actually producing any new jobs. It's healthcare is pulling us along, which I think is significant, but not surprising. And I would say it's really the trend that we've been on this whole year, right? Things have been gradually slowing. And I think the good news there is it's not some sort of cliff, right? We haven't fallen off a cliff. I think this was fairly predictable given the market forces. But I think the thing that maybe a little bit contradictory, not really to what you guys are saying, but that although AI is changing so quickly, we are not actually seeing it affect employment for the most part in the labor market yet. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that people haven't quite figured out the best way to employ it, right? And that's not to say that there aren't certain jobs that are going away, right? There was a big internal memo leaked from Amazon that said they were going to be cutting a whole bunch of jobs or not hiring for those jobs because they won't need them because of automation. There has been a study that's showing that within entry-level workers with high sort of automation potential jobs, employment has decreased 13%. And that's certainly not nothing. But I think sort of the main takeaway I've seen is that although AI is here, people haven't really figured out how to use it in a way to replace humans at all. And so I think, robots are coming for some people's jobs, but they're not coming for everyone's jobs, which I think is a relief, first of all. But I also really think there is an opportunity here because I think it's going to be the employers and the employees who figure out how to actually make use of AI and become more productive that are going to be the real winners, right? It's here, but we still have some time to figure out how to use it. But I think if you don't figure that out now, we're really going to be in trouble.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Rucha. I mean, I think at the start of this year, and I'd be curious what other folks on the panel think about this, but at the start of this year, I think there was almost a panic, or at least a lot of concern that, and you heard the headlines, such and such companies laying people off in favor of agents or in favor of AI. And then, sometimes behind the scenes, they hired half of the people back or all of the people back because it didn't work, right? And so I think there was a lot of initial oh my gosh, there's going to be massive disruption. And I think there probably still is, but the disruption is now in that work redesign conversation and the role that AI is going to play and the repositioning, what should remain human. Those conversations are emerging in the back half of the year, which I think are much more productive conversations. The other thing I think I would just note that I think is also interesting related to labor market trends, and it's just commenting on some of the research you've done recently, Rucha, but we would looking at SWP roles. There are about 50,000 of those roles created this year that are not in HR. And that's really interesting, right? And I think is maybe fodder for a separate conversation later, down in the course of this. But what pressures are the SWP, sort of practitioners going to face? Where should this be situated? How is that part of things evolving? But I think the AI thing is becoming more nuanced over time, which is probably a good thing.
And that suggests also that there's going to be a dearth, or at least a short-term dearth of capability, because if you're suddenly trying to create 50,000 strategic workforce planners, most of my fellow practitioners have been sort of kind of, kicking this particular tire for several years before we sort of got to a point where we feel we understand it. It's not a quick and easy thing to sort of get to, or at least not yet.
I think, David, I want to add on to something you said about, I don't think yet it is entire roles that are changing yet. Rucha, you said that as well. But I think organizations and individuals would be remiss to not think that our jobs will change. And so I think those people and organizations who are staying ahead of the curve and really designing the future that they want to create. So, AI can do the mundane tasks and not the creative, not the higher thinking ones. And so as an individual, thinking through your own role, your own day, your own responsibilities, and starting to design the role that you want with AI at the core. I think that is something that we can all do as we start to navigate this world where it's not entire jobs yet. Yeah. But I think, in 2026, we will see work change and we will see roles and responsibilities start to shift towards a more AI focused approach to those mundane tasks, the tasks that always should have been automated. But now with AI, we can do that much more quickly and efficiently.
And I'd like to say, I think that really ties back to what David was saying also about this shift, right, from skills to tasks. Because people have the skills in a lot of these jobs, and it's not about figuring out that part as much as it used to be, whereas it's really about what makes a job, right? Which of these tasks can we figure out how to automate? And I think that really speaks to what David was saying about how we have to sort of rethink what we've been defining jobs as.
It's interesting. Sorry, Russell, go.
One of the interesting things looking forward to 2030 is all the data shows that all the data shows there will not be enough people in the world with the skills that business wants to hire. So there will be a dearth of skilled, qualified people. And the estimates show that by 2030, 1 in 10 jobs globally will remain permanently unfilled.
Yeah.
So that is your challenge. So if you are in any way predicated on people to get stuff done, it is an existential threat. And that's, you can use AI to ameliorate some of that. You can use AI to do some of that. And I completely echo, and I'm sure we'll get onto skills and what all that means and what AI will do and so on and so forth. But 1 in 10 jobs will be permanently unfilled because there just will not be the volume of people with the skills business wants to have.
So what's fascinating about that, Russell, is I think back to the World Economic Forum paper from last year. One of the things I think that didn't get enough attention in that report is, in addition to talking about 22% of roles are going to be redesigned and 59% of skills are going to have to be re-examined, like all of those kind of big statistics, right? Buried in there was the notion that something like 11% of the workforce currently employed who are going to need reskilling and upskilling to make the transition to new work, or even in some cases to stay current in their existing work, are not going to get the training and reskilling that they need to be successful. So there's a weird symmetry in the 10% you just cited and the 10% of people that World Economic Forum is predicting we're about to leave behind on this journey for lack of investment. And one of the things I've been talking a lot about in any conversations I've had is there's a certain level, I think, of responsibility we have as leaders in this space and as organizations and HR practitioners in the orgs to really think deeply about what it means, to bring people along to, on this journey, and how to not just knee-jerk reduce headcount, but think, how am I going to solve that 10% problem you just mentioned by actively thinking about who to reskill and upskill within the team I have, so that I'm leaning into the future, leaning into where my gaps are going to be, not relying on market conditions, and instead creating the workforce I need, right? I think there's a lot more conversation that needs to happen on that front quickly.
Completely agree. And that WEF report launched in Davos in January this year, they said the biggest skills gap between demand and supply will be in technology roles, lumping them all into one for brevity. I've only got about 30 seconds to make the point. So lumping them all into one bucket, technology skills. The second biggest gap, and it is only marginally smaller, is leadership and management skills.
Yeah.
And I think that one is the elephant in the room. That's the one that we're so focused on AI and technology and job destruction and all of this noise going on. We're missing the importance and the enduring. The irony is, in the future of work and technology and AI, leadership, people skills are going to be fundamental.
Yeah.
I think a couple things, Russell, as you relate to that. I think leadership and the definition of leadership skills has shifted in the past decade, right? I think there was 10 years ago and before that, leadership meant a people-centric focus, right? And I think as businesses have shrunk and margins have decreased, leadership has become much more equivalent with management, right? And so managing the business, managing the function, and developing people became kind of a secondary focus. And so I do think as we imagine a world in which humans and bots work alongside each other, the concept of leadership is going to shift again. And I would posit we need to go back to those core people skills as we are working with AI, because they're not all that different, right? The way we delegate to a human with defining tasks, iterating, expecting to provide some feedback, those are the same skills to delegate to AI. And so I think organizations that really bring back that people-centered leadership focus are the ones that are going to succeed in closing that skills gap that you just mentioned.
The irony is, Kristi, that some people are more polite to their AI co-pilot than they are to their human person doing work for them.
To that point, Kristi, I've jokingly said to a few people that a great litmus test or a way to evaluate the current state of your managerial competence and leadership competence in your business is see how each of them writes a prompt. Because the way that you write a prompt, to your point, I mean, if you know how to direct people and set goals and set expectations and set conditions and feed in relevant context, that's pretty good prompt writing, right? If you've been doing that well as a leader for the last few years, writing a good prompt is just an extension of how you've been directing your team, in theory.
Well,
right?
you know what they say, David. People join great companies and they leave bad leaders. To as ever thus. I know John is getting frantic about dropping a poll in. Poor guy. You guys can't see. The rest of you can't see what he's sort of writing down here backstage.
It's pretty blue stuff. I will say, I thought actually it was a really good opportunity because I think we're really far down the road to talking about what is coming over the next few years. And as Kristi, you stated at the very beginning, we don't even know what's coming next year. It'd be great to hear from our from our audience on what is bothering them right now. We're talking about the 2026 plans. What's slowing your sleigh? Seasonal fun. Heading into the new year. Where are you in it from a planning perspective? I think there's a lot that is here and there's a lot that isn't. It would be great to understand if you have any comments in the in the chat, drop them in there. We have a lot of responses already, but it's telling that we have big goals for next year, but it's telling that here waiting on budget and workforce decisions, aligning priorities are still major priorities. Figuring out the role of AI and automation is a point of friction too.
But what's interesting about this as it sort of develops, I know one of the questions we may not sort of get to now was sort of, what are the issues which have held things up for us this year? These, there's nothing new here. You could have asked the same question in 2024, 23, 22. It's still short-termism, still a lack of clarity. It is the kind of I'm not going to say territorial disputes, but it is still this sort of, we continue to work in a hyper political environment in many of these circumstances, and it's those things which tend to put glue into the works.
That's I would say the one point you said on AI automation, and how people, how our audience might be thinking about that. That seems like it has become, obviously an accelerated priority in the last 12 months, but also kind of an accelerated opportunity. We're talking about how, the new opportunities that might be arising because of that technology, because of the opportunity that arises. I mean, talking about roles, talking about, new lines of business, wherever that may be. David Wilkins, you were talking about it a little bit just a moment ago, but would you expand on that a little bit? What are the opportunities, the new opportunities arising?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a few. I mean, I think David hit on a couple of these tangentially, right? But there are a bunch of new entrants into the space. We've seen a tremendous increase in the number of job postings and the number of people getting pulled into this universe of SWP. I think that's a good sign. I mean, I think it means that organizations are starting to take this seriously. I also agree with what David said earlier, that like the thing that I described as, maybe more inextricably interwoven, between work design, workforce design, and org design, he's right. They've always should have been connected, and they should have always been informing one another all the way along. But I think the pace of change and the way the work is changing due to automation, due to Gen AI, is putting an increased amount of attention and focus there, which affords now, I think, an opportunity to really have that conversation at scale and think about how these things should work together, and how do we turn SWP from something that, historically has been a little bit of like, do it once a year, it's headcount planning kind of related, into something that's kind of more of an always on discipline. Because I think, as this, I mean, none of us believe, and I think, the notion that like this is now the slowest year of change is accurate. It's only going to increase. And I think we spend a lot of time talking about Gen AI, but if you look at business process automation and you look at industrial automation in manufacturing plants and things like that's going just as fast, right? And so like you have actually three converging forces that are affecting the design of work, which means I think that those organizations who have figured out how to be agile and how to respond to that and how to dynamically plan and rethink work in critical areas related to all of that. And this goes back to Russell's point, they're going to have first mover advantage. If you think back to that transition from like water wheels and, mechanical operation of a factory, once electricity dropped, within 10 years, any company that was still doing it the old way was out of business and bankrupt. And I think we're in a similar transitionary state. Those companies that figure this out sooner are going to have competitive advantage and realize that advantage quicker.
That's very true. And I would add an additional skill to the many soft and important leadership skills that I think strategic workforce planners in particular need to really build on, and that is synthesis. You have correctly identified that AI is impacting severely, most likely, a chunk of the workforce. There is a whole chunk of workforce for which AI is going to have an effect, but it's going to be automation which is more likely to impact them than purely AI. We have other problems like sort of how many welders or any of those traditional sort of construction roles are now held by people who are getting towards retirement age. So the workforce planner needs to be able to bring all of those things together and filter out the wheat from the chaff. And I think the other thing, and these are great opportunities for workforce planning and also for any vendor that's in this space. But I do still think there is a need to connect the future and the promise that technology holds out to the messy realities that people actually face today. And in many circumstances, there are people out there who don't know how many people they've got in their business. No, perhaps that is perhaps that's fewer and further between, but there are still base issues that a lot of people have got to work through, for whom this conversation is terribly important and yet somehow abstract and alien.
Isn't that, David? And I agree with what you're saying, but if you're going to do this properly, you've got to embed the technology people approach across all your people processes. So as a slightly trite, crass example, so I can do it in 30 seconds, in your performance reviews, there should be a section going, how have you used AI to enhance your productivity this year? What have you done to put yourself out of a job? And how have you driven productivity? How have you moved it forward? How have you made a difference? And actually turn it from being historical, I'm brilliant and great, I've got everything I've done, and actually look forward. But then you've got to embed that thoughts, that methodology, that approach across all your people processes to make sense. When you're hiring someone, I want another David, whichever one turns up. I want another David. Well, what does that mean? And why do you want to cut and paste? Surely something has changed since we had the last one in the front door. It's challenging how we do everything on all levels. And therefore, going back to the leadership thing, that's brave. Because we've got to have the time to think. And in all this noise about artificial intelligence, I'm really not very worried about artificial intelligence taking over the world or whatever. I'll worry about that happening when my printer works the first time I ask it to. But I'm most worried about whether humans are thinking and whether we are getting the space, time. What do we actually think? So I don't think we spend enough time doing that.
I think it's an important distinction that's probably worth a finer point to say. We've talked about it a couple of times, but there is a world of automation that is happening that has nothing to do with AI. And if that is one of the improvements that this AI transformation is driving, where we're finding more efficiency, we're taking away the mundane. To your point, Russell, to give humans the time to think and lead and create all the things that we do uniquely as humans, that's a good output from this focus, this hype around AI. We're redefining work, not necessarily with the introduction or the takeover of AI, but we're rethinking work and redesigning it so that humans can do the things that we are just uniquely suited to do.
There's also a generalist argument too, I think, in all of this, Kristi, to your point. I mean, if you start teasing apart the durable skills that make us people, and you start thinking about discernment and judgment and innovative thinking, intuition, communication, inspiration, right? Like these things that are really human in their nature. And then you think about arming somebody who's got a broad set of strong generalist durable skills like that, and you arm them with LLMs and you arm them with AI. I think there's an interesting argument that like some amount of specialization will disappear, and effectively generalists who can connect the dots more effectively across different domains and connect the dots between a desired business outcome and the technical domain. They might not have the technical chops, but armed with an LLM, they might. And now you get someone who understands the business side and the outcome-driven desire, who can execute at a technical level through the support of an LLM. I think the nature of roles are going to shift a little bit, and some of those things that make us uniquely human will become potentially like a small pool of people like that really know how to use LLMs and Gen AI could be a lot more valuable than a team full of specialists who don't understand the generalist stuff, right?
It could be, but it also begs the question as to where you're going to get those generalists from outside of those who have acquired that experience over time before the arrival of AI.
Well, and I think there's something to be said there too, in thinking about sort of how we've traditionally approached education, right? I think we started with a model that was very generalist, and then we sort of moved into this specialist mode, right? With people have boot camps and classes are very specifically targeted. And I think what we're going to see now is a move back in the other direction. Because what you really, like the skills that the entry-level workers in particular need to bring to the table are no longer going to be those very basic coding type skills, right? The internet can do that for us now, right? Google can do a lot of that very basic research for us. What we're going to need is the skills of people connecting with others. And as you're saying, really the thinking and the more analytical skills, like that's what's, I think, really going to be important and allow entry-level workers to excel.
We had some...
David, going back to the WEF report you mentioned on the future skills businesses we need going forward, they actually fall into 2 or 3 key buckets, and there's been a couple of messages on the chat going forward. One of the buckets is creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, seeing the hidden meaning, connecting the dots, all of that kind of things. One of the others is people management, and the other third big bucket is leadership. Those are the key buckets of future skills going forward. That's what's taking place. I think, David, the challenge with pure generalists relying on LLMs and AI for the technical know-how is, as long as they give a good answer, you're fine and laughing. But we've all experienced, I am sure, that hold the front page, occasionally they don't always give you the right answer. It's that challenge, even down to this morning I asked Gemini who the manager of Celtic Football Club was, because they're going through a rough patch at the moment, and who's the manager, and the answer it gave me was 3 managers ago. So be afraid, be careful.
Fair.
John,
are we ready for a giveaway?
We are, and given that we promised a spin the wheel game halfway through this session, we really want to jump to it now, and also remind everyone that we are going to have time to answer some of your questions. Russell, you tipped the hat to one really good question, which is in the Q&A. But folks, as we're going to run this game now, please drop your questions into the chat or in the Q&A, and also thanks for your comments. There's some really good stuff in here, and I'm glad we've been able to kind of engage and speak to some of what we've been discussing already. Pardon me, I'm going to put up my wheel spinning game, and give me just a moment. All right, so we are very lucky to have some of our distinguished authors here today. So thank you. We're going to be spinning the wheel today 3 times in order to give away 3 copies of upcoming and current works from our panel. So I will start with the Strategic Workforce Planning Handbook by David Edwards, which is due to come out in January. Is that right, David?
Yes, that is correct. 6th of January in the UK and the 27th of January in the US.
All right, very exciting. So we're going to spin the wheel and see which one of our attendees will be receiving that in the mail, and we will follow up with you via email afterwards to make sure that we have a mailing address for you, and we will order it for you.
That's the old joke. Yeah, first prize is a copy of David's book. The second prize is 2 copies.
Helena, thank you so much for being here. We will follow up with you, and you'll be receiving David's Strategic Workforce Planning Handbook coming soon.
Congratulations, Helena.
Which, if you don't know, has nothing but rave reviews so far. So you're in for a treat there, I think.
It is too true. In light of our theme today, Russell Beck's The World of Work to 2030. That is a Leadership Awards winning publication recognized by the Financial Times. My copy is on its way, but for our registrants, we have an opportunity to win one right now, or spin the wheel. And we will follow up with you after the event to make sure that you get this in the mail.
Just in time for Christmas holidays.
Villy.
Congratulations, Villy. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think.
Congratulations. Leave a review. And also from Rising Tide Cooperative. So thank you, Kristi. Kareem Pagano, your colleague at Rising Tide, has published her book on building the skill organization. blueprint for transformation that is very relevant to our topic today. But let's see who will be taking a copy.
Yes, Korean's book is available for order now for anybody who is not lucky enough to win the wheel spin.
April, there we go. Well, thank you to our attendees. I'm sorry if you didn't get a chance didn't win one of those prizes, then we will follow up and share links with you so you can see where to buy those. But needless to say, available at all good bookshops, and in David Edwards' case, come January 6th. All right, so we do have a couple of really good questions in the chat that I wanted to jump to before we move on to some of our other final questions and look forward to next year. So I'll pull up one or two of those if that's okay. I think there was a really great question from Jill Todd. Thank you, Jill. Russell, so pleased you brought up leadership. Why are we still struggling so much with good leaders?
How long have we got?
Yeah, all right. That's a week-long seminar right there.
Short answer. I think that's a massive question, and I think there's multifaceted, and I think there's lots of different areas. I think from a perspective is that we hire people, they come in, they do a brilliant job, sales person, ops, finance, whatever, and then we promote them and they inherit a team. People management and leadership is different to doing a functional job. It is, I hate it when we call it soft skills. I think there are technical skills, I think there are people skills, and they're both hard. And I think all the data pretty much shows that actually inheriting people leadership going forward, the future of work, people management is the job, and it should never be considered an adjunct to the job.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah.
Also, if I could just jump in, I would also say that I think, as you were saying, the things often that get you promoted at the lower levels are more about the output itself, right? As opposed to those people skills. So in some ways, maybe the person who's the most productive as an individual contributor is not actually the best person to be a manager, right? And we haven't offered any training or anything in the meantime. And so to some extent, we might be using these old processes to pick in a way that we shouldn't be.
Rucha, I'm going to amplify the point. Yeah, about training, right? So as a former leadership and executive trainer, this is near and dear to my heart. We know that first turn from individual contributor to people leader is the hardest, and everyone after that is incrementally easier because you start to build the skills. But if we look at how learning has changed over the last decade and the last 5 years with a pandemic, right? We used to, from a leadership development perspective, we used to have week-long in-person seminars to train our leaders. And as the world of learning has changed in many ways, very beneficially to be dispersed and available all the time, I think we've kind of forgotten the fact that leadership happens in practice, right? Leadership happens in those moments. And so I think that the organizations that are really focused on that and the individuals who take the time to not only just study the concepts, but practice them in a safe environment, those are the ones who are really building the skill and not just kind of going forward in title and poor demonstration of capability.
Yeah,
I agree, Kristi, and I think actually we too often see organizations that want to do leadership development, leadership training, and then we're going to have a 2-day crowbar everything into it, and then sheep dip people, and then we can tick the box, it's been done. That is, I'm sure you'd agree, that's the worst possible way to do it, because you can't absorb it, you can't deal with it, you've got no time to implement or have a go, try, and so on and so forth. And we look at designing programs that maybe a module a month, so you can go have a day, explore something, explore it in the safe environment, and then try and apply it. Have a go. Because sometimes we learn far more by failing, by having a go and getting it wrong, and actually learning from that, and then having another go. Standing up, dust ourselves off, and keep going. So actually, I think there's a lot in the design and the development of these, but I think I would almost say it's possibly remains the largest untapped potential for productivity, for business benefits, to actually help organizations do stuff, get things done, and go forward.
I have another, there's a great question here from Diane. Thank you, Diane. That I will pass to you, Kristi. And she highlights a really important point that relates to our poll. It's great being able to identify skills and future skills that will shape a workforce. And I paraphrase here a little bit, but do you have any examples of how to free up how you can develop those skills within an organization and free up time to do that in a company that is already stretched?
Yeah, I think this is where automation becomes an advantage, right? So whether that is automation supported by generative AI or not, right? So I think it's thinking about the work differently, and in some cases, kind of deconstructing the work and building it back up in a way that it probably was always meant to be, right? But now with the benefit of technology, allowing technology to do those things. So an example. Most of us have used, many of us, I shouldn't say most of us. If you haven't yet, don't feel like you're behind. Here's a challenge. Ask ChatGPT to write something for you. Don't copy and paste it, please, but just ask it. Or ask ChatGPT to solve a problem for you, right? Something that you're thinking about in your head. And the efficiency that creates versus kind of wrestling with that thought over and over and over again on your own is going to free up space. So using AI as that kind of help me think through this thing so that I can then take those initial thoughts and carry them forward. Again, another conversation for another day, but I think the answer is start to find those moments and those processes within our own jobs where automation, again, whether that is supported by AI or not, can strip away minutes that will lead to hours, that will lead to, components of your job that you don't have to do anymore. And then take that time selfishly and block it for upskilling. Those people who are doing that now, that's what I mean by kind of designing the future of your job. Those will be the ones that will shape what their role is in the organization of the future.
Awesome, thank you. I think we may have one or two more questions before the top of the hour, but I wanted to get a couple more before we get to that stage. And I think, Kristi, we had talked about expanding on that idea of the kind of connection between AI skills and work. What's the how do you build that connective tissue?
Yeah. I think it starts with a fundamental kind of, again, deconstruction or at least questioning of the way that we've thought about these systems in the first place, right? So again, training in the past was transactional. It was event based. It was time limited, and learning has evolved to be, in some cases, always on, always available, always readily available for people. And I think it's that approach that we need to take with the future of HR, strategic workforce planning, L&D, right? We are going to have a future. The timing, I think, is a little bit TBD, but we're going to have a future where AI and humans are working alongside each other. And the role of the human is to manage or lead or change or govern the AI, right? Or the automation more generally. And so thinking about that and how do we need to rethink the skills that we have and to work in that world. And that means redefining workflows. It means potentially creating new roles, as we've talked about on this session today, redefining what it means to be a leader and perhaps versus a manager who is managing workflows and processes. And so I think having that layer, that focus on workforce redesign really as the foundation within HR is going to be important for organizations to really shape the future and create that connective tissue between work and humans and AI, supported by the skills and the capabilities that each of us does best.
So, Kristi, when I was at a strategic workforce planning conference, I was fortunate to do the opening keynote in London this year, and I presented that notion of like, you need to have like a function within HR that owns that work redesign conversation, and even work architecture at a fundamental level. And that they need to have relationships with finance, with IT, with the business, and like you need tiger teams like thinking about this stuff, right? And I swear, I think half of the people's phones went up to take a picture, and I had so many people come by and say like, "Oh my God, can I have this presentation? I need to send this to my CHRO like right now because we're having these conversations." And when I've raised it to clients, it's been the same reaction. Like people are getting there really quick. But to your point, like you need a group that just owns that process, that gets really expert at it and can be that tiger team within the business. I think that's so spot on.
And the cross-disciplinary piece is so important as well, exactly. Isn't it? And you know, there will be burning questions out there that we won't get to, but you know, one of them is where do we start? And you know, my constant refrain is, wherever the workforce is critical to the business, identify that criticality. You know, don't try to strategically workforce plan everybody. Try to plan for the workforce which is currently the most strategic in your business.
Yes.
And that will not only have a direct business relevance and resonance, but it will also renew your license to operate across a wider space.
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing that HR and strategic workforce planning can do right now is get a seat at that table. I think as we are talking to organizations about AI, it is almost always driven by the IT function. And if that remains true, then the integration of AI will become a technology project, not a people-centered one. And as HR practitioners, we have the opportunity to lead and drive the change that we know people are resistant to, because that's what we do as humans, or to sit back and wait and watch this technology project evolve.
I have
luckily all previous technology projects have absolutely delivered on time, on cost, without any problems or any issues downstream. So we're fine.
I'm not sure you're being 100% sincere there, Russell. I don't know what it is. But...
So I want to give a soft plug to an upcoming webinar we have in January. We'll be having Nick Kennedy from Workforce Planning Institute join us to talk about how HR teams are already using AI and how that is becoming part of their cadence, which roles, which tasks are being automated. So that will be extremely exciting. And I think that's a further step onto what you've just been talking about there, Kristi. We have probably a minute for everybody's final question, because there's just been so much great interaction from our audience. And I will give you an option for your final question. The option is this: New Year's resolution or a prediction for the next 12 months. You can choose one of those. Kristi, I'll start with you.
Oh, I was hoping you wouldn't start with me.
Okay, Russell, I'll start with you.
I don't know. New Year's resolution. I'll go New Year's resolution because the first thing that struck me was listen more, and actively listen. If you're having a conversation with someone and you can hear your little voice going, "I want us for tea. Is it going to be sunny? What's going on?" Then you're not paying attention. Listen and let them talk and just see what they're going to say. And if you give them the space and the time, I will be amazed if their thinking doesn't go to places that you've never even considered. So listen, actively listen.
Okay,
30 seconds.
Kristi?
Okay, so let's do New Year's resolution as well. So New Year's resolution is say no more. Focus. So focus is my word of the year for 2026.
Nice, same theme. David Edwards.
I'm going to go with the crowd. New Year's resolution is to only ever wear this jumper once a year. It's really hot and it's ugly.
Rucha.
I would say connect more. I think it's really easy to sort of stay behind your screen. And I'm looking forward to having more actual phone calls with people and trying to see them in person.
Wow, yeah.
Let's hope so. And David Wilkins.
I'm going to go the prediction route. I think we're going to see automation advances continue at an even accelerated pace than they are today, which I think is going to create significant internal pressures for organizations to continuously reevaluate work, job design, process design, org design. And I think those organizations that figure this out sooner are going to be the vanguard and will be the ones who ultimately shape the future of how this stuff all comes together. Yeah, I think this year is going to be a breakout year where we're going to see some early innovators start to move into the limelight for things that they're doing and the ways they're approaching it, and the emergence of what we might think of as new best practices and how to approach some of this. Really, everyone who's read these 3 books, I think, should have a head start. So go read these as a starting point and then apply the principles to your business. It's a good place to begin.
Excellent.
Thank you. So we're at the top of the hour. Thank you so much for making time to be with us. Kristi, Russell, David especially, but Rucha and David Wilkins, thank you also. And to our audience, thank you for the time today and throughout the year. We've had a bunch of really great webinars. We're looking forward to kicking that new season off in January 2026. I can't believe it's 2026 already. Thank you all, and have a wonderful holiday season and start to the new year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.